Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your moderator, Ali Aslan.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Great to be back at GLOBSEC, and great to be here in the Havel room, ladies and gentlemen, for a session titled Europe Rising Opportunities, Risks, and the Road Ahead. Clearly a lot of challenges for this continent, and couldn't be more delighted to be joined now by three outstanding European leaders who will help us shed lights on how to combat and battle these many challenges that this continent is currently facing. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of Denmark, Mette Frederiksen, the President of Finland, Alexander Stubb, and the Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama.
President. Good. Lots of presidents.
Prime Minister, great to have you with us. I think you're familiar with the stage. President, Prime Minister, great to have you as always. Thank you so much for joining us here at GLOBSEC for this session on Europe Rising. Let's get right to it, Prime Minister Frederiksen. The European Parliament is always listing 10 issues to watch every year, 10 key issues and policy areas that will dominate public debate and the political agenda of Europe in each given year. Clearly, security and Russia's war against Ukraine ranks at the very top. The war that is in its third year. Your country and you have prominently announced that it will transfer all the ammunition to Kiev, becoming the first nation to do so. You've also formed a crisis ministry to combat Russian espionage and cyber attack. You're one of the European countries that is leading in terms of not just words, but deeds. Why is this issue so important to you?
Why is it so important? Because this is not asking me primarily a question about Ukraine. This is primarily a question about Russia and their imperial dreams. I see no signals, I see no signs in the Russian behavior in Europe or worldwide that convince me that they are going to stop with Ukraine, no matter how some people think we could end this war. When I look at them at the West Balkan, when I look at how they are trying to destabilizing in my own society with different kind of attacks, when you look at the behavior in Africa, especially in the Sahel region and so on, I consider them as the biggest threat close to Europe. And of course, I would never accept that a European country like Ukraine is under attack by an aggressor. I mean, that's how we solve problems back in history, but not today. And therefore, I said from the very beginning, we will give Ukraine what they need, and we will be with them as long as it takes. And we just had a discussion on stage earlier on. I think this very abstract academic discussion about red lines and restrictions has to stop. Now it's a question about making sure they will win the war. And gladly, I have been supported from the whole parliament in Denmark, all political parties, and from the population. I mean, the Danes are really fighting this war together with Ukraine.
No, the Danish people are very much behind Ukraine, very supportive of their cause, and the Danish government is leading when it comes to deeds and not just words. President Stubb, the war has also had a profound impact on your country, to say the least. You've become a member of NATO in April last year, abandoning your long-held neutrality. Clearly, this has been a major shift in thinking and policy in your country. Was it hard to convince your populace, your voters, your people to go along with the subject matter, or are they equally behind your decisions as they are in Denmark?
I mean, just a couple of observations on that. First, just a little correction. We dropped the doctrine of neutrality when the Cold War ended and became a country which was militarily non-aligned, but obviously joined the European Union immediately with no restrictions and became a very close partner with NATO. Was it easy to convince? Yes, actually it was a no-brainer, because there was an opinion poll that measured our NATO popularity on the 23rd, 24th and 25th of February, of 2022. And in previous times, it was roughly 50% against, 20 in favor. Over 3 nights, it switched. So 50 in favor, 20 against, and now our NATO popularity is rather North Korean, it's 80%. So you can see that Finns are very pragmatic when it comes to turning the tables in security history. You know, you can make many arguments of why it happened and when it happened, but I think if you look at Putin, and if you look at from his perspective, he had one aim, and that was to Russify Ukraine. He had aim number 2, not to bring NATO to his borders, and he had aim number 3, to try to split the Euro-Atlantic partnership, and I think he fundamentally failed in all of those. And in many ways, you know, Danish support has been excellent. Finland, I think, is the 6th in the world when it comes to GDP per capita support for Ukraine. And the reason is very obvious. We've been in that situation. We were there from 1939 to 1944 when Russia was trying to deny our existence, our independence, our territorial integrity, and our sovereignty. We ended up losing 10% of our land, including Karelia, where my father was born and where my grandparents were born. And there are many Finns in the same predicament. So we're not going to have a problem in Finland in continuing to support Ukraine because we see it as a war of an imperial aggressor against a smaller player. But let's just make one thing sure, and I'll finish here. The main battle here is the one about Ukrainian identity, independence, and its place in the world. And Ukraine has already won that battle.
Yeah, Finland certainly is now, with NATO membership, is at the forefront of Europe's efforts to preserve Ukraine's independence and hopefully victory along the way. Prime Minister Edi Rama, your country has been very unwavering and unambiguous in its support for Ukraine. From the get-go, you've displayed full solidarity with the country. In fact, Albania and Ukraine signed a treaty of friendship and cooperation, fostering closer ties between both nations. Why is it so important for you as Prime Minister, as Albania, to stand firmly behind Ukraine?
Thank you. Before I answer your question, I just don't know what you had in mind when you put me together with these 2 people. Because usually you put me in this steam train of Balkan people in panels with, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 persons, and now I am in an electric car with 2 Nordic. And I feel very honored, by the way. No doubt about that. Somehow lifted up in another level of society in Europe.
Well, clearly the GLOBSEC people think very highly of you.
And but I can also understand that you felt too much alone in the ice, and you wanted some sun from Albania to raise a bit the temperature here. But going back to that, you know, I just want to make clear for everyone, because here we are in Prague, and I have to say that for us, we grew up in a country where Washington and Prague was just the same. So we couldn't come. We were told that both sides, American imperialism, Soviet social imperialism, are just the same devil. So we had to stay with Stalin after the Russians gave up on Stalin. And we learned in the hard way that there is no interest, there is no need to even look at Russia like a possible ally or partner of ours. As far as in Russia, the dream of some version of imperialism, being in the old way or in the new way, will not fade away. And so we are the only country in Europe where since 1990 there was no visit, nor from our high-level authorities in Moscow and either from high-level authorities from Moscow. And to conclude, I would say that our solidarity with Ukraine is the most natural thing, because as Mette said, you know, it's out of imagination that in our world, in our Europe, in 21st century, whatever dispute, whatever different way of understanding, the neighborhood can be solved through sending an army. This is completely unimaginable. But by the way, I want to bring here the very revealing story of the Russian anthem. I don't know if you are familiar with that or not, but when Stalin asked the writer to do something very motivating because the Soviet Union had to fight, the author did it. And then when Khrushchev came in power, he asked the same author to change the text. And then when Yeltsin came in power, he called the same author and said, listen, now we are not anymore Soviet Union, we're Russia, you have to change the text. And when Putin came in power, and it's a true story, he asked again to change the text. But the music never changed in Russia. So this is...
Well, first of all, I think both President Stubb and Prime Minister of Denmark would agree. We're very happy to have you on this stage. This is, I think, goes without saying.
Their chance to smile when they come in this kind of forums, you know.
But Eddie is very humble, because short anecdote, one of my best friends in foreign policy is Carl Bildt, and he used to sort of joke around and say, well, Sweden will join NATO before Albania, where it didn't. So we are the ones now learning from Albania as new member states, and that's why it's really nice to be on stage.
Now you are touching a wound, because there is also another similar thing about European Union, you know. You know what is today to be a Euro optimist and a Euro pessimist?
No.
So Euro optimists say that Turkey will join Europe under the Albanian presidency. And Euro pessimists say Albania will join under Turkish presidency.
Well, we have...
I'll tell the story to Carl.
Yeah, but Prime Minister Frederiksen, I think, half-jokingly, the segue is the right one, because while Albania may not be part of the European Union yet, the war in Russia has put EU enlargement, the issue of EU enlargement back on the agenda. The facts speak for themselves. Last year alone, the US opened accession talks with Ukraine and Moldova, granted Georgia candidate country status, and started accession negotiations with Bosnia. Outgoing EU Council President Charles Michel told me at the last year's Bled Strategic Forum, the EU must be ready to accept new member states by 2030 if we want to be credible. Would you agree with him?
I don't have a specific date, of course, because it has to be merit-based. I mean, I think the next round of enlargement is extremely important because of how the world has changed. I am totally in favor of a stronger European Union, and as Alexander just said, I mean, this is one of the positive things in these years, that Putin underestimated us. I mean, we have a stronger European Union now than before the war. We have a stronger NATO now than before the war. And looking into the future, I mean, what is the next steps? It is to build a stronger European Union in size, which means enlargement, but of course also in our willingness and in our own capacities. So I am really in favor of enlargement, but it has to be merit-based, because otherwise we will not have a well-functioning European Union. And this is at least as important as it is to talk about enlargement, because we have seen now a European Union tackling a pandemic quite good, and a war quite good, energy crisis and inflation quite good. And now we have to tackle the global competition on technology. I mean, one of the big mistakes we have made in the future were to be depending on Russian gas and oil. And now, unfortunately, and it's, I mean, sometimes you have to do like this when looking at ourselves. I mean, now we are depending too much on China when it comes to new technologies. We have to win that race. So we have to move on in many different areas at the same time, including enlargement.
And clearly your country is going to hold the EU presidency next year, so a good opportunity perhaps to breathe a new life into the subject matter. President Stubb, also want to give you an opportunity to remark briefly on EU enlargement. Many countries have been waiting, if you will, at the footsteps of the EU for many, many years, including Albania. I'll come, of course, to Prime Minister Rama in just a second. What is your assessment? Is it time to speeden up? Because clearly the world is not sleeping. There are a lot of other countries. China, Prime Minister Frederiksen mentioned it. China is trying to vie for influence in this part of the region.
Well, there are many reasons why I'm really excited to be able to answer that question. The first one is that I am a Euro optimist. Second is I'm an EU nerd.
Turkey under our presidency will be in.
Second, I'm an EU nerd. And third, in Finland, it's the government that decides on EU policy, so I have no responsibility about it, which means that I can say whatever I want. My take on enlargement is that it probably became one of the most important strategic foreign policy instruments of the European Union on the 24th of February 2022. I've never seen the European Union as unified as it is right now. I think a lot of countries that were inherently anti-enlargement became pro-enlargement, and people don't look at enlargement anymore purely from a legalistic acquis communautaire, fulfill the criteria type of a perspective. And I think a symbol of that was the performance of French President Emmanuel Macron here last year, where he basically reversed the policy. So from a foreign policy perspective, I would like to see the enlargement of the European Union, yes, provided that the criteria are met sooner rather than later. Now, my fear in all of this is frustration and size coming from Western Balkan states. I fully understand the importance of Ukraine's EU enlargement and the negotiations of Moldova and Georgia. They are strategic, but for me, Western Balkan EU enlargement is, if not more, at least as strategically important. That's why I actually think, final point, that things like the European political community are a good segue, but these negotiations need to happen sooner rather than later, and there needs to be a strong political push for it. Were I to be a commissioner, I think in the next commission, one of the most important portfolios will be the one on enlargement.
Yeah, certainly time is of essence here when it comes to world politics. Europe has to take the next step, something that you, Prime Minister Rama, of course, have been pleading for. Your country has opened accession negotiations with the EU in 2020. I remember 2 years ago when I interviewed you about EU enlargement and the future of the Western Balkans. You coined this beautiful phrase that I quote you a lot actually on this. You said you are tragically optimistic about the future of the Western Balkans, and enlargement is a big issue. You may not be an EU country, but you're a European country. What would your message be to?
At least this fact they cannot decide in Brussels. So we are Europeans.
Absolutely, you're a European nation for sure.
This
not
cannot
EU
be
yet.
decided in Brussels, at least. So this is sure. But I have a slightly different view than Alexander about who was the biggest promoter of enlargement in the last two years. It was not Emmanuel, it was Vladimir.
Yeah. Point.
And this is the tragic optimism, unfortunately, because Europe needed Vladimir to attack Ukraine and to not take any more for granted that the Western Balkans are there. And it's enough to tell them, guys, one day the blue horizon will be yours. But for the moment, we have to do some other things, and you have to understand this is merit-based. But is it really merit-based? I'm not sure. And on the other hand, enlargement means enlarging. So Ukraine, yes, is enlargement, but Western Balkans, it's here. So it's not enlarging, it's practically uniting, and it's practically understanding that it's not feasible to have something here be detached from your body, because then it can be a source of big infection. And when it comes to Albania, we are Europeans, we are stubbornly in love with Europe, and we don't take a no for an answer, so we'll be with the European Union till the end, like we were with Stalin till the end. So even when the Russians decided to get rid of Stalin, we were with him. So we'll be with the European Union even if the European Union will disappear. And we'll invite everyone to restart from Albania and to rebuild the new European Union. I mean, we are loyal, but not only loyal, but there is no chance that other actors like Russia can change our mind. But it's not the same in the region. The region is a place where Russia has a grip, a big, big grip. And before it's too late, it's important to make certain things differently, and I must say that certain things have been done differently, starting from the new growth plan, which is a new thing in the history of the integration, because to countries that are not members are given chances to start and integrate in the single market, to start and integrate in other parts of the whole neurotic organism of Europe. So this is very, very good. But on the other hand, it can be even faster in a way that, because let's face it, the biggest problem at the end is to convince public opinions all over Europe that we are getting the Albanians in, and this is not easy. Although it would be great for Europe to have Albania in, and I can guarantee you, but this is not easy.
Yeah, but I think it's much easier right now.
It's much easier right now, but it doesn't mean that we'll be like that in 2, 3, 4 years' time, because things may change again. So it's important to create the conditions that anyhow the members of the Western Balkans are much more integrated also politically in Europe without being members. And it doesn't, for example, what is the sense of having European security policy and European interior ministers being together without having the Western Balkans in that same table? What is the sense of not exchange the same data and everything? Because when we speak about organized crime and terrorism and all these kind of things, they have created their European Union already, and they work with no benchmarks, no veto, no merit-based, no nothing. So they are very integrated. They work transnationally. They are very fast. So to tackle them, we need to be up to the speed. Otherwise, the time that you exchange information to make an operation, it may be too late when the others have already acted. So in that sense, I believe that there is much more that can be done. But again...
And I think the timing, as Alexander Stubb pointed out, may be very favorable.
But whatever they do, we are not going to give up our love for them. So they have to be clear on that. There's no chance. But the Western Balkans should not be taken for granted. This is my understanding.
For certain, and I think that message is heard loud and clear in other European capitals. Certainly, as everybody here pointed out, Russia's war against Ukraine has prompted, if you will, a new momentum in this debate. This session is called Europe Rising: Opportunities, Risks, and the Road Ahead, Prime Minister Frederiksen. One of the issues, clearly, when I travel throughout Europe, and you and everyone here as well, of course, migration and the right-wing shift in European public opinion is of concern. The far right is in power or on the verge in numerous European countries. It made gains in the last EU elections, came in first in France, Italy, and Austria. second in Germany and the Netherlands, opposite in Denmark and Finland. But irregular migration has become a big issue that has determined many victories and losses in politics over the last years. As a social democrat who has taken some of the toughest lines of immigration within Europe, and by doing so, reduced influence of the far right in your own country, what is your advice to those nations struggling to contain the rise of the far right at the moment?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's my job to advise colleagues to do anything, but you are totally right. We have some very strict laws now in Denmark on migration. That is not, it's not something we or I have done as a question about the far right. It's because I think it's the right thing to do for Europe. To be very frank, I mean, Denmark has always been a very safe, a very secure, a very open society. And some of the internal problems that we are facing now is because of migration. Whether I look at the crime scene, when I look at problems with parallel societies, social control, lack of gender equality among some groups of migrants, asylum seekers and so on. All these problems, but especially the question about violence and organized criminal activities, it is because of lack of integration of people coming from outside. So I am, as a social democrat, totally in favor of securing Europe's external borders. I think we need to know who enters Europe, and we have to take the decision about how many we are able to take care of in our own continent. And if we don't take control on migration, whether you talk about legal or illegal, then it's a question for smugglers and for traffickers. And I mean, being a democrat is always being in control with what happens in your society. So I think migration is, security is topic number one, but migration has to be topic number two. And we need to secure the external border. We have to take decisions on our own, how many people should enter Europe. And we have to return all people from outside Europe who does not respect our rule of law, the way we have built our societies, and especially those who don't respect the European values, whether they are radicalized or there's a risk of terror or something like that. So just to say, for me, it's not tactic, it's not strategic. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. If you want a sustainable society, you need to be in control. And Europe is not at the moment. And therefore, I understand why some people vote right-wing. I understand them because they feel insecure in their own country.
And indeed, it is of concern to many citizens. Most Europeans now consider migration...
Myself included, I have to
Absolutely.
say. We had a long discussion at actually at the last meeting in the new European community. And we had a discussion. I asked some colleagues, do you have areas in your own capitals where you feel insecure? And they said no. And I said, what? That's not true. All of us know that there are areas where we don't want to walk at night, where we don't want our own kids to go to school. And the problem is that it's not the elite who pays the price for migration. It's the poorest people, it's the unskilled workers, it's those who cannot, I mean, go to other areas to live or pick other schools for their kids. So sustainability is a lot of things. It also includes migration today. Yeah,
it's a topic that certainly is on the minds of many voters. A very emotional one, migration, one that polarizes societies. We've seen the clashes in the UK recently, for instance. So it's very important that leaders get ahead of this topic. It's certainly a big issue in my country, in Germany, Alexander Stubb. And I know it is a big topic in your country, or at least has been. You closed the border with Russia last year after more than 1,000 migrants entered the countries, and you have subsequently approved a law to turn away migrants at the border with Russia. Clearly also something, an issue that is very, very important to your country and to your presidency.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is more of a security-linked issue than a migration issue. So basically, it's Russia instrumentalizing innocent human beings as weapons, in other words.
But the rise of the far right in your country has also been documented.
To a certain extent, I think, I mean, if I may make two remarks on immigration in general, I think one is based on a false promise or narrative that many of us in the free world pushed after the end of the Cold War. It was this innate belief that globalization will be good for all, which then had a narrative of free movement of goods, free movement of services, free movement of people, and sort of this eternal peace or end of history, as Fukuyama, I think, quite well put it. And then when we started to see a frustration somewhere from 9/11 to the financial crisis, and in Europe to the migration crisis in 2015, there was a realization that, well, perhaps it wasn't all good for everyone. That's why we saw, for instance, Brexit and many other side effects or an emergence of the right in this. So that's the first point. My second point is that there are never easy solutions to complex problems. And I think Mette put it very well, and if I were to sort of summarize what she was saying is that there's an if I may, interlinkage between security, demography or migration, and then I would bring a third element to it, which is climate change. And if we don't solve these three things together, then I think what we saw in 2015 was a walk in the park. So now we need to start changing the narrative about what migration can be, because demography speaks a very clear and factual language, and that is that we will need more labor-based migration in Europe. But because the narrative comes more from the asylum seeker, different types of migratory moves, it becomes extremely complex. I'm always an optimist, so I don't want to, paint the devil on the wall. But look, there's one war which is not getting any attention in the international discourse, and that's Sudan. So we are very quick to talk about Ukraine, we're very quick to talk about Gaza, we sometimes mention Sahel. But listen, Sudan is 20% of African territory, 280 million people, in the midst of a war where roughly 150,000 people have died, and there is an 800-kilometer border by the Red Sea, which is knocking on the door of the Suez Channel. So once the war in Gaza has ended, once the war in Syria has ended, once the war in Sudan has ended, and if conditions become impossible, what do you think is going to happen? So these types of problems we need to try to tackle.
Just briefly, Prime Minister Rama, your country has signed a deal. We're talking about migration. Your country has signed a deal with Italy that would send up to 30,000 asylum seekers to your country to process their asylum requests there. The deal is the very first deal struck by an EU member country and a non-EU state. Why did you sign this deal? You prominently said you wanted to help Italy, to be a good friend, a good neighbor. What was the primary motivation for Albania to sign this deal?
First of all, because we cannot say no to Italy. Very simple.
You cannot say no to Georgia.
Also to Georgia, but
That Meloni, just two.
we cannot say no to Italy in any way because of history, because of friendship, because of many things, and because of how much Italy was there for us when we were in a really bad situations after the change of regime. But secondly, because I believe, as I said before, and you all agreed, that we are Europeans and we have to behave like Europeans, even they are delaying our license, to be part of this European united family. And this is a problem for whole Europe. Mette brought an example, which is exactly what happened. In that table in the new European political community, she raised this question, and the answer from few colleagues was no. In fact, the country of one of the colleagues is becoming notorious exactly for that, for areas where you cannot walk. Notorious. But the answer didn't come based on the fact, but came based on the political side. So ideologizing this issue and making it an issue of the left and of the right, and then bringing this issue in the middle of the political campaigns and dividing the society about something that is just rational, has brought the problem of immigration in the level of the cultural war. Yeah. And this is the biggest damage that has been done to the European values, to the European principles, to the whole way of understanding what are the Muslims. So I'm Catholic, my wife is Muslim, we have 2 kids that are Orthodox from previous joint ventures, and the youngest one may decide to be Buddhist, I don't know. And we have no problem with that. Albania was the only country in Europe that had more Jews after the war than before, and there is no Jew on the records of Yad Vashem that has been deported from Albania to the camps. There are 2 names that have been deported in Bergen-Belsen, and they were not Jews. They were Albanians because the family that was hiding the 2 Jews decided to give the 2 sons and to protect the Jews till the end. We are loyal, so we'll protect them till the end. So this is to say that in a country with a big Muslim majority, at that time was even bigger, the Jews were saved by Muslim families. So what is this cultural war? The Muslims are coming and the Muslims have been, cannot be integrated. In fact, it's not about Muslims, it's not about cultures, it's about exactly what Mette said. It's about the very simple notion of a territory governed by the people that are elected in that territory that has to guarantee that who is entering is this one, this one, this one, and who is getting out is this one, this one, this one. Yeah. This thing that we come, and you come, and everyone comes, it's playing the game of many other forces, but not of what is needed for Europe. Now, just one thing, because there is also the other side of the story, which I believe now Europe cannot stand this heat if Europe will not politically do something major to become a more united union. Right. Because this is not about Denmark or Germany or Italy, this is about the whole European land. So Europe is not anymore young, is the oldest in the globe, is not anymore as rich as it was. The part of Europe in the GDP of the world is going down. Europeans are not very much keen to make many kids, while the others are doing that. So workforce is needed. So of course, Europe needs much more immigrants than it has today, right? But in a regulated manner. And the last thing to say is just think of that. TikTok in China is bright and shine, and everyone that enters there feels that is living in a paradise. Yeah. TikTok in Europe is the hell. So Europe is over-regulating in everything, is over-deregulating in media and in freedom of speech and in all this. And I am very, very much afraid that Europe will end in a terribly bad place if it will not make its mind to be one and to speak like one. Because we should win the war in Ukraine, Mette is right, but how you win a war when one side is there full in and the other side is told, listen, we give you this airplane, but you have to fly until that part. And the others we give you this rifle, but we have to shoot just in this direction. We give you this, and then there are them who say, in the meantime, you have to fight corruption.
Prime Minister, I'm sure this could be a second day of GLOBSEC, just this panel.
So I have to tell you the same thing I tell you every time. If you invite Balkan people, you have to extend the timing.
Well,
okay? So
well,
if you want memos, bring the Nordics, put 5 minutes, they give you the memo, they go in the ice.
Yeah.
When we sit, we want to discuss,
bring the tea,
to have fun, bring the Turkish coffee here.
Yes, yes, yes.
And to see even the future in the cup at the end.
Prime Minister,
you are too much Germanized, my friend.
Well, I think that is not wrong. I think that is not wrong. The problem is I have
to be too much Germanized is not wrong. It's very wrong.
No. I think it's not wrong. I think
it's time to start talking football.
Yes. Yes. This is. I think it goes without saying that every time you have Prime Minister Rama on the stage, it's going to be a good time. I think there's a perfect combination of. Is a perfect combination of strong content and entertainment. But I thank you all. Believe it or not, I had more questions. I had more questions, a couple more issues that I wanted to talk about, namely the upcoming
Where are you going? What do you have to do?
I'm right here. This is me indicating that the session is wrapping up. This is me politely and diplomatically saying that this session, unfortunately, I would have loved to sit down and have another hour to go. Suffice to say, Europe rising, opportunities, risks, and the road ahead. I think we can all agree that this was a fantastic session that all of us would have loved to hear more from and about. Suffice to say, time is out, so I've been told. Prime Minister Rama, Prime Minister Frederiksen, and President Stubb, it's been a delight. Thank you so much. This is your applause. I appreciate it.